All right, everyone. Demetrius Gelatis here, and I'm joined tonight by Devon Cloud. Devon, how you doing?
Just fine. How's everyone doing tonight?
That's not how this works. They can't answer Devon. I'm just kidding. Come on. Okay. So seriously though, I this is actually the first time we've spoken. So maybe my sense of humor, maybe that fell a little short. Maybe that's not a good first impression. But okay.
No worries,
Anyway,
no worries.
thanks, Devon. So the I let's see. I've invited Devin on because here's all I know about you, and here's how we got connected. Is I joined this Facebook group called Mental Management for Billiards. And for those that have listened to me, you know I'm passionate about the mental game, and I'm always and so I found this mental game group, and it had to do with a group of people devoted to learning more about the inner game. And so I was intrigued, and Devin is he's the one that kind of put this together. And so through a few posts on his in his group, I kind of crossed paths with him, and turned out that he was willing to join us for a show here and maybe share a little bit about mental game that I thought would be fun. So Devin, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the plug for my group. It's I guess one of those things that I really thought that amateurs needed to to have an outlet where they could really see these types of or get these types of conversations going. I think it's one of the things that, as far as amateurs are concerned, for pool, it has been missing a good bit. So.
Absolutely. So yeah, and I want to hear more. There's so much. So why don't we just start a little bit at the beginning? So uh tell me about yourself and pool, like just on the personal side of things. Like do you obviously you're a pool player. How long you been playing?
Off and on since I was 8. Um, I've always loved the game. Um, I stopped playing like a dummy. I guess kind of in middle age, probably when probably the when I probably could have gotten the best at the game more than anything. I got too busy and stopped playing for about close to 10 years. And then picked it back up again, fell right back in love with it again, and have been playing ever since. And have been taking it a lot more seriously ever since in terms of learning things. That's when I started taking lessons from pool instructors like Randy Gottlicker and Scott Lee and others, and just decided to become an instructor. And then after I became an instructor, one of the main things that I really realized was missing in terms of a lot of the instruction that I got was the mental game. I wanted there to, of course, there was plenty of mental instruction with the courses I took, but I just felt like I could do more with that, and that's kind of where my love for instruction has gone is for the mental part of the game, and of course fundamentals as well. So
Understood.
yeah,
So and where are you located? Where, I don't even know what part of the country. Are you in Texas?
I am. Yeah, I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, in the same city as Randy, which is where I got connected with Pops, and and the rest is history. So yeah, I
And
just
are you a full-time pool instructor, or is that full-time, or are you kind of doing that? Like, I don't really know much about, or and yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, I'm part time. I got a regular full time job that I'm still doing. This is kind of my side gig, but something that I'm planning on doing full time after I retire.
Yeah,
I love it,
makes
you know.
makes sense. And then so yeah, so teaching, and of course, and I've never had a chance to work with you. I have had a chance to a moment of silence for Scott Lee. I'm sure many of the people that are listening to this have worked with Scott in the past. Of course, he's not around on this side. I'm sure there's a pool table somewhere. He's hacking up somewhere. But no, I really enjoyed my experiences with Scott. And anyway, um, that was distracting to me thinking about Scott. It kind of got me derailed.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but
Sorry about
anyway,
that.
I yeah, of course. But I know that I know the types of stuff that that they work with. Is that set, pause, finish, that type of, really helping people understand how to, how to, between pre-shot routine, set up, stroke, and just being able to deliver the cue where they're looking and kind of eliminate some of the rushed jerkiness and all that stuff. So you help people with that on the physical game. Is that right?
Absolutely. Set pause finishes is the methodology behind the stroke in everything I do. I'm a firm believer in the SPF and F methodology.
I don't disagree. And now a lot of people, I've done these podcasts, and I've been I've kind of gotten a reputation as being an anti-fundamental guy, and so now they're going to think I'm talking out one side of my mouth, and I'm misunderstood. I'm just misunderstood, Devin. What I've so just for anybody that thinks that I'm against fundamentals, I don't. And what I would say is, I think that a chain has a lot of links, and it's only as strong as the weakest link, and that in my experience, a lot of people have gotten fixated and sometimes they overrate fundamentals, thinking it's the only part of the game that matters and it's all they want to work on. And so, one thing I think, so I, maybe some people don't know me that are tuning in for the first time, and I'm a full time instructor. I do 3 day pool boot camps, and anybody that's interested in learning more about that can go to my website, which is MN stands for Minnesota, mnpoolbootcamp.com. And but basically what I've realized is I teach stronger players on average. Like a lot of now, don't get me wrong, we're gonna have a lot of overlap because I work with a lot of guys that are, any there's players all the way up to the advanced levels that still have a lot to learn about timing, tip accuracy, rhythm and pre-shot and eye patterns and things like this. So for sure, uh, but what I think is in general, Devin, do you think it's safe to say that the higher the Fargo rate the player or the lower the Fargo rate the player, the worse their fundamentals probably are? Is that a fair statement to make?
Absolutely. Yes,
So
I think that's fair.
yeah, and so now that doesn't mean that people that have higher Fargo rates can't benefit, because the fact is that they're just trying to make smaller improvements to show value. So, somebody with their thumb on their cue, that's, whatever, they're obviously their fundamentals are on fire, and they can make big sweeping changes. Whereas the better and better you get, the changes that you can make and the improvements you can make are smaller. But then again, there's less room to grow. So those things still matter just as much. But what I would say, and the reason I bring this up is because a lot of the students I work with are guys in the 500 range, 600 range, even 700 range. And so a lot of the students I work with are strong intermediates and actually advanced players, to where all they're doing is stroking into a Coke bottle. And I just feel like there's other parts of their game that they've neglected. And so for that reason, I've kind of gotten this thing where I'm like, hey guys, there's more to the game than stroking into a Coke bottle. However, if you don't have a good foundation, then none of the other parts of the game matter either. So I've always made it like, I'm not dismissive of fundamentals. I just like, they're just one chain link that's important among other chain links. And I think that mental game ties in there too. And I think a lot of people, I heard somebody on your site was kind of making light of mental game. And I said the same thing. It's not the only thing, but it's a damn important link. So anyway, I just had to
Yeah.
address. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Well, I just first, there are plenty of really really good players out there that have absolutely poor fundamentals. There's nothing that says you can't get good at this game doing things incorrectly.
That's for sure.
You can certainly get good at doing things the hard way. So it's not always that the good players have great fundamentals, and can certainly use some coaching in the fundamentals department to get even better, to get more consistent. But for the most part, yeah, it's and I am a firm believer in the sooner you start to learn this stuff, the sooner you see an instructor in your pool game, the easier it is going to be for you to develop a good game. Because bad habits are the hardest thing to break, of course. And uh, uh, I'm really interested in teaching everyone the mental portion of the game. I know a lot of people might not think of it as being as important as it is. To me, other than your fundamentals, it's the most important thing of the game. It's the most important part of the game. Mental management in terms is a pretty big gamut. I guess if you really go down that road, it's not just about emotion control in terms of not getting frustrated and keeping your excitement in check and keeping anxiety from ruining your thinking patterns and stuff like that. But it's also just understanding imagery and how important that is to the game, right? In terms of imagery is what your body uses uh, in order to understand the instructions your brain wants to give it, and understanding that and understanding how that works, I think, is very important. And all sports have picked up on that. Every single one of your major sports types of sports, your NFL, the NBA, basketball, tennis, they all have sports psychologists on hand at all times now. Even in elementary school, you've got soccer and tennis coaches, and in these summer camps where they've got sports psychology and the mental game being taught. So I mean, it's just something that I think in America anyway. I think Europe has done a better job at this, but in America, for the amateurs, it's kind of missing in pool.
So
And that's
why do you think it's so many people are so dismissive of the mental game or undervalue it, or why do you think it's underrepresented? Like, what are your thoughts on why that's the case?
well, I just think it's the way that Americans have learned how to play pool, which is to learn it from the hustlers. In and I think that there just really hasn't been a whole lot of science behind it in terms of and there's still a ton of people. I mean, I'm sure you're probably get as frustrated with this as me. Don't even think instruction is a necessary way of learning the sport. You know,
Yeah,
um, uh,
so now I just want to question that. I'm not disagreeing. You said that you think it's just because of pool culture and people learning from hustlers and gambling and the old school. If that was the case, then you might see other sports that have a different culture that have a high emphasis on mental game training. Are there sports in our country that you can point to that have a very good foundation of coaching and instructing on the mental side?
well, yeah, tennis.
Okay.
If you like a tennis, even like I say, that gets started in elementary school. On if you have parents that are well off enough to send you to these summer boot camps for these sports, they're getting taught it at a very young age. Soccer the same way. Um,
Are you talking mental game as well?
Absolutely,
Okay,
yeah. There's
I didn't know that.
yeah.
So it could just be so that it's accepted as an important integral part of the skill set needed to succeed in other sports, but that because pool, so basically I'm trying to catch up with you, Devin, so bear with me. I'm
Mhm.
restating it. Because pool is not like some scholastically sponsored and backed mainstream sport. It's something where kids basically learn pool by cutting class at noon so they can sneak into the pool hall and throw around some $5 bills. And because of that, because that's the venue, people kind of learn just kind of like the backstreet Street Fighter way of doing things, which is, you kind of
Exactly.
puff up your chest and bluff people and kind of bravado and swagger and try to throw balls in the hole and, hope they go in. And just kind of like every time you lose, you just try to pick yourself up and try again and trial and error your way to the top. So yeah. So then why doesn't trial and error work? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's mixture of culture and trial and error, I would say. I mean, you would know this better than me. You're probably a lot more in the gambling realm of the sport than I am. Well, in fact, I'm sure you are. Um, uh, but I mean, how many people are like you and I that you hang out with that enjoys instruction and is willing to spend the kind of time with instruction to help these people along, like you and I are. You don't really see that a lot. You've got a lot of people that want to focus on their game, and you know, if you want instruction from them, you better be willing to pay for it in a good amount of money in sets that you're playing them, and they might give you a tidbit here and there, but they don't want to give you all of the information.
You're
Because
right about there's as the more we talk, I'm starting to see other things, Devin, pop up, which is like, and I don't want to. I'm realizing we could probably talk an hour about why people underrate mental game. But here's one thing that just kind of spooked me just now. I started thinking about how much misinformation there is about how the physical game works,
Oh yeah,
and how to teach it. So like there's a bunch of different things. There's like how how do the balls actually work? What's actually true and what's false? Which practices are actually effective and not? And then there's how well people can communicate that information. And then there's like what you're saying, the motives and behind the people doing it. Are they doing it out of the goodness of their heart and from a place of anyway, so but the funny part is I think about all the things people are wrong about the physical game, especially historically. People didn't know how cut and deuce throw, and they didn't really understand how the balls react and how the rails really react. And some people think that balls pick up speed off rails, or they think that people have weird superstitions about if I put spin on the ball, I can help the object ball spin into the corner off the pocket and all the weird stuff. The bottom line is, if people are that's wrong about so many physical things, there's a lot of misinformation about the mental game too. There's got to be, and so yeah. So not only are there not a
tons.
lot of people talking about it, but a lot of the,
Yeah,
and so maybe what's happened is a lot of people that have run into. I'm just trying to answer that question. Why don't more people focus on this? And it's like, well, there's not a lot of people talking about it. The people that are talking about it are wrong about a lot of it, and a lot of it's not effective, and because it's intangible and they can't really see it and test it, like it's not something that you can test, like it's not as easy as verifying. You can verify throw really easy by setting up a combo a couple times and trying it different ways, but it's a lot harder to test how effective mindsets and attitudes and imagery or different outlooks are. And so maybe because it's a little bit non-tangible, and there's so much misinformation, people just kind of get a little bit, I don't know, cavalier about it. They say, oh well, just be the ball and muscle through.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing how much bad information's out there. I mean, when you if you were to take a PBI instruction course from Randy, he'll spend 2 hours just talking about the farces on what people believe as far as the sport's concerned. It's part of the program to know that, uh, and it's um, and it goes from just basic beliefs of some of the things people believe that are just completely against physics in general, to just bad drills, like you mentioned the Coke bottle drill,
Or yeah,
but
or
that
like the L drill. People are
you know
obsessed with the L drill because they saw
yeah,
it
the
was in a
L
movie.
drill. I mean,
I'm like,
oh
what are we working?
Lord,
What is this doing for us?
yeah,
Anyway, so let me
right.
ask you this. Let me just throw the listeners a little nugget here. Let me ask you this. What would be if you had to pick one, two, or three of your favorite misinformation about the mental game? Like if there was a couple of things that are just like, gosh, I hate it when I hear people talk about this. It's so stupid. Like what do you got for me?
Well, number one on my list, uh, for sure is just play the table. I hate it.
Okay,
I hate it.
you
I
know
hate it.
what, Devin? I thought you might say that because I've read your posts, and I'll tell you something. I
Yeah.
never told you this. That might be my favorite too, and as far as my pet peeve. But I asked you, so let you go first. Why don't you tell me why you hate that?
Because it's just simply not true. One, um, you don't just play the table. There's a ton of other factors that are involved in things. Uh, but I guess the main reason is anybody who is asking how they get over the pressure that they feel with an opponent, it it gives them absolutely no help whatsoever by telling them just think about the table, not your player. That gives them no information. How do they do that?
Yeah,
How
it's
how
it reminds me of
how
when people would ask Mosconi how to become better at pool, and he'd say, what do you want to do if I want to be a pool champion? What advice do you have? He'd say, don't miss.
yeah, right.
That's
Yeah,
about how
it's just
useful that is.
yeah, one liners. It's just when it comes to the mental game, people need to understand why our brains work the way that they work in order to understand why it's important. I can tell people make an image of something, or make an image of the shot all day long, but if I don't express to the student why making that image is important, which is, look, your body doesn't understand words, it doesn't understand calculations, it doesn't understand conversations with people, it understands imagery. You make a movie of the shot in your head, and that is what gives your body the instruction it needs to perform the shot. and without that information, it's a bit meaningless to say, yeah, create an image of the shot and shoot it. Why? The why is as important as the do. You know.
Yeah, so we're gonna come back to imagery because I know that's been chomping on the bit for you. I mean it not in a bad way. I love the passion. But I want to just go back to this whole play the table thing. So I agree. Like I'm just trying to restate what you said a little bit. Like the idea of saying play the table, not the player. It's basically like rug sweeping or dismissing their entire concern. Like, hey, I'm nervous about playing this guy, and basically they're saying, don't be nervous about playing that guy. And it's like, well, that's not entirely convincing. It would be like, just to kind of as an analogy, if somebody was like rock climbing, and or if somebody was getting ready to like do something where they're going to be like 1,000 feet up in the air looking down at jagged rocks, and they're like, man, I'm really scared. Those that is just right now my body is just I'm really nervous. And they're like, well, just don't be scared. Don't worry about it. It's like, well, that's not how your body works. Emotions don't respond to you might as well be really, really hungry and just say, just don't be hungry right now. Or it's like, that's not how your body, you're an animal, man. We're all animals. And our animals, as animals, we have physical needs, and we have emotional needs and emotional reactions. And that's just not how, you can't just order yourself not to be nervous. So,
Right. Right.
okay, I'll tell you mine. I'll tell you my pet peeve, and then I'll let you see what you think. My other pet peeve, besides play the table, not the player, which basically is a big middle finger to the entire industry of the entire philosophy of mental game. It's basically saying none of that's needed. Just play the table. The other one that's very similar, and I've heard this a few times in the last few years, and I might offend a couple of people listening, but when people tell me, oh, I don't feel pressure, I don't really, you know what? I don't really deal with that. I mean, I never really have problems with pressure.
Hmm.
When I hear that from
Sure, you
somebody,
don't.
Devin, all that tells me is that this person is not a competitor in my definition of competing. Because for me, a competitor is somebody that tests themselves in meaningful situations, which means they're playing against players that are good enough to potentially outperform them and expose their flaws and weaknesses and punish them for it in ways where either they're losing, it's painful losses, whether it's money, social standing, or just the pain of losing and coming up short. The bottom line is that real competitors lose all the time. Real competitors get nervous. Real competitors fall short. Real competitors, you know, dog it and succumb to pressure. And I mean, we could pick any pro pool player in the world and we could find videos of them in the last year or two dogging it under pressure because they, Shane melts down under pressure and Filler melts down under pressure and Federer melts down under pressure. I mean, the US Open finals last year, he didn't hold up under pressure the best, but you know what? And he admitted it. But you know what? We respect them not because of the times they fail, but because of how they handle that and go through it and succeed many times. And the bottom line is that if all those guys succumb to pressure, who are these guys telling me that they don't? You know what I mean? It just
Yeah.
drives me
No,
nuts. What are your
it's
thoughts
just,
about that?
well, they're just not realistic. If they don't think pressure affects them, it's just not. It's just not realistic. And look, pressure is here's I guess the way I kind of feel about pressure. A lot of people think pressure is a bad thing. Pressure is not a bad thing. Pressure is a bad thing when it causes anxiety. Um, Pressure itself, I mean, like if you, I mean, let's go back to the caveman days, right? You want to talk about pressure? Let's talk about the hunter in a tribe that's either got to kill something so that the tribe can eat for the next week, or they're starving for the next week. And think about the amount of pressure that must have been like.
Mm-hmm.
So pressure has a way of creating you to have the ability to ultra focus, which is a great thing. But if you add anxiety to that pressure, which a lot of us do, none of us are perfect at not doing that, of course. The anxiety has a way of taking that ultra focus away from you and making it very hard to concentrate. So that's kind of where I am with it is fight the anxiety, not so much the pressure, but at the same time keep your emotions in equilibrium. You don't want to be too high up on the scale, and you don't want to be too low on the scale. You want to be right there in the middle somewhere.
So let me ask you about
Uh,
that. But before I'm gonna, because I have a clarifying question about that. But one thing I just realized, maybe I should have a little more compassion for these people that say they don't feel pressure, because Devin, maybe now that I'm thinking about it more, maybe the people that are saying that, it's because they don't have any alternate strategy to combat pressure and or anxiety, and so therefore their only line of attack is denial and just pretending that it doesn't exist because they don't know what else to do. So they don't have any other coping mechanisms or tools or any other, So anyway, maybe I should feel compassionate that these people, that's their that's their best line of attack. Same with the
yeah,
player. Same with the player or the table, not the player. It's they're not saying that necessarily because they really believe it or they think it's effective. They just don't know what else to say. So a little
right,
compassion
right.
for that, but
I would agree. I would agree with you there, but I don't know if you need to have more compassion for that, right? Because I mean, the whole
okay,
idea is dig deeper, right? There's,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm
you
just
know,
trying not to burn too many bridges with my listeners here. I think I've alienated everybody but like four
yeah,
people by now. But okay, so back to this. So you're kind of drawing out a spectrum where on one side you have anxious, and on the other end is what, complacency. And so you're talking about being aroused and emotionally engaged to attain focus, but not being so far into anxiety. So let me ask you this: from a, I think it's kind of maybe common sense, but like, what is the like why this I mean, I suppose, why does that anxiety, if it's so harmful for performance, why do humans fall into it so easily? What do you think?
I think it's because we don't really have an outlet for that. I mean, basically, let's talk about what sports has sort of taken over for humans, right? We
Sure,
used to be
sure.
hunters and gatherers. If you ask me, what sports kind of took over was after we started buying food at the grocery store. Sports is kind of that hunt. It's that drive to take care of that instinct of survival for us a little bit, and I think not everyone is the hunter in a tribe, right? Um, so a lot of people don't feel comfortable in that area, and so that anxiety, I think, is worse for some than others, and it's a trait that you have to cope with and learn how to cope with, and that's part of the mental management piece of the game, right? Is how do you cope with it? How do you cope with lessening that part of it while keeping the excitement part of pressure still alive a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And so what I think the only thing is, when you kind of mentioned that we're not all hunters, like I think that some people might have taken that to mean that like not everyone's born with the same, killer mindset or drive to. But I would, but and but I want, but you also said, which is that everybody struggles with anxiety and dealing with anxiety, and everybody struggles with these emotions. So it's not like some people just aren't cut out to play pool. I just don't want anyone to get that message. Uh,
Not
but
at
but
all.
but as far as anxiety, like I think about the nervous system, uh, and like we have nerves that tell us like if your hand is on a stove, you're going to experience pain, and that pain is there for a reason, which is to say, hey, dummy, get your hand off the stove. And when
Yeah.
I think about negative emotions, and when I say negative emotions, I'm talking about emotions that are unpleasant to feel. I'm not saying that they don't. That's a good point. I'm not saying they're bad, that they don't serve a purpose. They just, when I talk about negative emotion, I'm talking about stuff that's unpleasant in the moment to feel. And so anger can be unpleasant at times, and despair and but also fear and things, I call it fear. I had a therapist once that was really against euphemisms. He's like, no, it's fear. He doesn't like to call it anxiety. He's like, I call it fear. Anyway, so the bottom line is that fear and anger, these are like the same way that we have a nervous system. And it would not be a good thing if we just couldn't feel pain anymore, because then we're probably going to end up like, harming ourselves because we don't even realize it. The same way our emotions are like the psychic nervous system, and anxiety exists, fear exists to for a reason, which is it's an alarm system to tell us that we might be in danger and we need to protect ourselves. So it's there for a reason. What's bad is it's like a security system telling us that there's an intruder, which is good if there's an intruder. but it's bad when that security system's going off every hour of the night when we're trying to sleep. And so I think the problem is that for some people, that security system keeps going off and they're in a pool game and their fight or flight, you know, primitive flight or flight system keeps going off and telling them that they're in a life or death situation, starts pumping adrenaline through their body and distorting how the table looks and dial, you know, and next thing you know, their arms shaking and their brain is racing and they can barely breathe. And it's not necessarily useful for pool at that moment. So
Right.
I think that fear has a place, but it's just not necessarily, it's maybe that alarm system's being triggered, not at the most
Well,
opportune time. What do you think?
yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And then I guess, I mean, to break it down a step further, you've got your primary emotion, which those are the emotions we all have. And then you've got your secondary emotions, which are learned from our environments through life, right? So anger or is a primary, whereas maybe I don't know, embarrassment or despair or those types of things are the secondary emotions that we feel, and that has to do with uh, uh, issues we developed while we moved through life, and so how we react to those primary emotions is what mental management is all about. Like we're emotional beings. There's no way around that. And as a matter of fact, you're going to feel emotions before you even realize why you're feeling them.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to say, oh, just don't let that bother you, which I guess would be my next one of of those one-liners I really don't like. Don't let that bother you.
Yeah, just
You
don't
know,
stop feeling. Just stop
yeah,
feeling.
yeah, yeah. That's just an impossibility. That's just an unrealistic idea.
If that was
Uh,
constructive advice, I'd still be married. Oh, I'm just kidding.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Eh, eh, so it's such a hard thing to break through to people on the Facebook page when when you're not having these conversations person to person a lot of times, which is uh, you really have to understand how. Okay, first off, I'm having this emotion. Okay, great. Why am I having this emotion? Well, this and this and this happened. Okay, well, does this emotion make sense in the grand scheme of things and what's going on right now? Is it helping me? Is it hurting me? Bring it to its conclusion. Take a couple of deep breaths. Uh, Tell yourself why you love this game, and get right back into focus. These are the mental techniques that you got to learn so that you can, these emotions are going to happen. Stuff is going to happen. You're going to miss. You're going to dog the easiest shot in the world. I think of dogging shots, and I think back on Shane Van Boening when he just missed the most easy 9-ball shot in the world because he let the crowd get to him last Moscone Cup. Um, and that one goes through my head because it's like, you know, man, Shane's my hero, and then I saw him dog a shot as bad as I might dog a shot under that kind of pressure, and it's like, oh my lord, what's got to be going through his mind right now?
If only
Uh,
he had just played the table. No, so one thing
yeah,
that I want to mention,
uh,
Devin, that I really think
yeah,
that people I want people to hear something, which is I talked to a guy today, and I think when it comes to mental game, so I want your feedback. I think some people have the wrong goal, which is they want to stop the feeling bad. They want to stop the primary feelings. They want to stop the front. They don't want to ever feel bad again. I don't want to feel frustrated. I don't want to feel scared. I don't want to feel, you know, I don't want to feel, yeah, really, I mean, self loathing, fear, anger. I don't want to feel those emotions anymore. I need to learn a mental game system so that I don't feel those things anymore. Whereas actually, it's like, no, 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 you're going to feel those things. Mental game is not about turning off your feelings. Mental game is about managing
working through them,
through, right? Is that what you're saying?
absolute work through them.
100%
Yeah,
agree with you, Devin. Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And you
man.
see them to their end. That's what you do. If you bottle them up, you're screwed. You're not gonna play well for the rest of the match. And it's going to
That's
get worse. You're going to go further down
yeah.
the rabbit hole if you do that
So
because
let's talk about that. So
you
when
know
people, these people that say just play the table and just I don't feel pressure and whatever, these people they don't really know how to manage their emotions. So that's kind of what they're suggesting is just kind of wall them off and exert your will. Exert your will
absolutely.
and transcend those emotions and be a winner and don't let winners don't feel. That's kind of what they're saying. And how does that
Hmm.
play out, do you think?
Not well. In my experience, it doesn't play out well because it just, like I say, you get to that point to where you're frustrated. If you don't deal with those emotions, then you go back to the table frustrated. If you go back to the table frustrated, you're not focusing, and you're going to dog another shot, and you're going to get even more frustrated and more frustrated, and it's going to continue to happen until you finally give up.
So I
And
100% agree, but I want you to run with this. So let me argue with you, just the devil's advocate here. What about the person that says, I don't know, man. One time I was playing this match and this guy was struggling a little bit, but then this guy really pissed me off and I got angry and I played really good. So I don't know. Sometimes I mean that usually just makes when people do when I get mad or something, I just play better. What would you say to that?
well, I mean, it's very possible that could happen. Uh, but do you want to take the chance on that, or do you want to start to write your own destiny with it? You know, I mean, uh, certainly you can. Uh, uh, oh, you know, an example. Man, I was playing league one night, and they put this kid, and I say kid, I'm 50 years old. This kid was in his 20s or something, but he was wearing a shirt that said, "My dreams destroys your dreams."
Wow.
And and that shirt pissed me off. Like I have no idea why I took that so personally, but boy, did I take that personally. And I just 7-0'd the guy. I mean, he probably got to the table twice. I played the best game of my life, so I can understand how maybe getting upset at your opponent might make you get ultra focused and just play really good. But really, if we're being honest, how often does that really happen? Where
See,
where
that's
you can
it's
control that
that's what I
emotion,
think. It's like when
you know?
people say they play better drunk. It's like they remember the time they made that shot, but they
Right.
they don't have an objective memory. By the way, Devin, I got to jump in with this. I would just walk up to him and say, "My dream is for your dream to destroy my dream." Because then you kind of put them in this paradoxical no win. Like I just like I'm more of a
Uh,
strategic, like I'm more of a moving kind of guy, and I just like to tell them that and see, go ahead, try to destroy my dream. How do you do that? Anyway, okay. Um,
yeah, yeah. I
so
just
you,
boy
so
yeah,
yeah,
that shirt rubbed me the wrong way. But
so
yeah.
emotion can, to your what you're saying is emotions at times don't always have negative effects, but that there for every time there's a match like that, of course, there's plenty of times where they self-destruct and they're so raging mad at themselves they can't even, you know, give themselves a chance. And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. I would
yeah,
say that in that scenario, one time out of 100 is helpful.
yeah,
The other 99 times it destroyed your game if you didn't deal with the emotion. Or at least certainly destroyed your game for a while until you just naturally got over it. Um, you know, it's yeah, and that's part of the mental game, right? Is how do we do that quickly?
yeah.
How
And
do we,
I'm thinking
you
about
know?
what you're saying. I can also think about, you're talking about playing good out of anger. I can also play good out of fear. There's plenty of times when my best pool has been when I'm terrified of getting an inch out of line, or I'm terrified of missing a ball and letting this guy out of his chair, and I'm terrified of giving him another chance. And a lot like fear can, like you said, it can be arousal and focus when it's managed. But I've also had times it's unmanageable. So maybe a good question to be able to ask yourself is, yeah, when you're really, really angry, is this working for you right now? Or is this a good,
Mhm.
effective anger that's translating into a great performance? If so, then we can be okay with it. But is that what's happening, or are you shooting balls at a rail, one stroke at shots, and throwing chalk? Because you got to be able to kind of like figure out in the moment. Just because I have an emotion doesn't mean it's not working. But is it working, or is it self-destructing? And if it's working, I don't need to rock the boat. But maybe if I'm self-destructing, maybe I should take a step back and reassess.
It kind of, yeah, right. It kind of reminds me of this old adage, which is, you know, we all think, we all played that one time, kind of like I did with that kid that wore that shirt, that we just played absolutely lights out, right? And so we think that because we were able to do that that one time, or maybe two or three times even, or whatever the case may be, that because we were able to do that, that should be the way we play all the time. Uh, and that's just not realistic. You know, we can hope to play that well, but realistically, we're going to play our average most of the time. That's why it's our average.
Yes.
Um, so it kind of reminds me of that too. The guys that play angry, they had a time just like me where that worked out great for them. So they'll say, well, that's what I'm going to do all the time. Well, you know, I don't think it works really. You
Yeah,
know,
it's well, it's
I
like
think,
you might as well decide not you're not going to miss again. It's like, well, yeah,
yeah.
it doesn't quite work. So okay, so I'm just trying to think about yeah, we were kind of answering the question of like why bottling up emotions doesn't work. It's because you're just not it's not always it's just not very effective. And of course, that doesn't mean you're not going to have intermittent success. It just means that it's going to be a bumpy ride and nobody's steering the car. So okay,
Right.
so then so what I've learned or what we're really stating so far is one, emotions are not bad. They just need to be managed. And that mental game is learning not to shut out emotions, but to manage your emotions. And that two, when you bottle them up and don't manage them, nobody's driving the car. It doesn't mean you won't have some good days in spite of yourself. It's just like if you have bad fundamentals, it doesn't mean you're not going to have some good days. It's just there might be an easier way to do it. So mental management is like fundamentals for your mental game. So now,
Absolutely.
so now we can kind of get into some of the things that you wanted to talk about in more. And so knowing that you've just, knowing that this is a conversation and not a lecture series, like what, where do you want to start? You were talking about imagery. I know you have other things on your mind. So where does, if for somebody that's just like, okay, they weren't really interested in mental game. Now they've heard you talk. They're like, all right, maybe there's more to it. I need to learn. Um, where do you want to start with them? Like, what should they, where do they, how do they, besides joining mental management for billiards, of course, on Facebook?
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk about the major goal of mental management. Uh, it's flow state, being in the zone, dead stroke, right? That's our goal is to reach that mental state where everything's just happening on autopilot, and you're feeling great about it. You know, right? So that's what mental management is trying to do, other than emotion control, right? It's trying to get you to that heightened state of play where you're just on autopilot. Um, uh, how do you do that? Well, there's different ways that you can try to trigger those emotions, and I say the word trigger on purpose because triggers become very important in this sport, in terms of telling you when to turn your conscious side of the brain off, how to trigger your subconscious to know that being in dead stroke is where you want to go. Triggers help you to get there, and ways that you can trigger dead stroke to happen. And you I say that loosely because you of course can never always trigger dead stroke to occur. But if you want to give yourself the best chances to get into dead stroke, you use triggers to get you there. And how do you do that? Well, you think about what it was like to be in dead stroke. Uh, you think about the feelings it was like, how things came so easy, how much in rhythm and tempo you shot while you were in dead stroke, and you repeat those things while you're not in dead stroke in hopes that your brain says, "Oh, that's what you want to do," and you go there. So those are the types of things that mental management helps you to do, along with help you to understand how your body gets its instruction to perform these very, very precise motions that you have to do in order to make a ball, right? Millimeters count in this sport.
God,
Um,
they sure do. I had an experience yesterday where I played. You know what? It's time. I haven't bragged for a while. I played a couple sets against the 10 ball ghost, and my table's playing really, it's getting recovered next Wednesday. And right now it hasn't been recovered for 3 years. And I've got like commercial level use on it. So it's because I teach full time. And anyway, it's almost unplayably tough right now with how much grit and how much resistance on every shot and personality and 9 foot diamond with it is stingy. But anyway, it's there was a couple shots where I really, really needed to get good on a ball. For example, the 8 ball was on the side rail near the side pocket point, and I had to shoot it past the side pocket into the upper corner. And it was one of those spots where if I got dead straight on that 8 ball up the rail, I could make it, but then I'd be trapped on the rail and I couldn't get on the 9. But if I got a big angle on that 8 ball, I just flat out wouldn't be able to make that shot. It was just in a horrible small ball position where trying to cut that ball down the rail, it was just so it looked so tough, right? And and so one of the funny parts is I had to shoot the 7 to the side. I had to follow my cue ball to the rail. And I knew straight in would be tough, and I knew bouncing off the rail 4 or 5 inches would be tough. And so my first instinct was just to kind of shoot the 7 and roll it over to the rail and just hope it worked out. And I stopped and I walked around the table and I asked myself this question. I said, let's pretend. I'm not saying I can land my cue ball in a speck of dust, but let's just pretend that this worked out and I could just let's just pretend that I happened to get lucky and land the cue ball exactly where I wanted. Where would I even want it to be? And I looked at this spot on the table and I'm like, it was like what, an inch off the rail with the perfect angle, with still full enough to confidently make the ball. And I was like, well, that's probably, I mean, of course, I'm crossing the line of position from 4 feet away and I'm never going to land on that dime, but I might as well, if before I just roll it on over to the rail and just see where it ends up, why don't I at least give it like, if my dreams came true, that's where I would like my dreams to come true. And then I shot the 7, the cue ball rolled over and bumped off the rail an inch and stopped right on that spec. And I'm like, look at that. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can land a cue ball in a spec anytime you want, but does it hurt? Does it hurt to at least dare to dream? You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So anyway, I just why did I get into this? Because um I'm sorry, Devin. How did I get I got hurt in my arm patting myself on the back about hitting a good 7 ball shot. But I think that there's a couple things. First of all, one thing I think about with mental game is that it's not just about triggering dead stroke and learning how to give your body the right kinds of instruction to get cooperation. For me, a lot of achieving dead stroke is clearing the clutter that prevents us from getting into dead stroke. So it's almost is for me, it's almost as important the troubleshooting part of it. So it's like um there's a lot of things we can do to get in stroke, but then there's a lot of things we could do that prevent ourselves from getting in stroke. And I'm a big believer in like learning to clear the clutter that keeps us from getting in stroke is just as important. But anyway, so those I don't remember
What do you
exactly.
call clutter?
So I think that there are okay. I think that there are many productive things that we can. I think clutter comes from beliefs that don't serve us, and stories that we tell ourselves that don't serve us. And so, for example, we were talking on your mental management for billiards. We were talking about attitudes towards losing, uh, things like this. So I think that if somebody tells themselves a story that's like, hey, um, I can't, loss is not acceptable, if that story is waking in them determination that is providing them energy that they need to fight off fatigue and to gain focus, if that story is like helping them bear down and dig deep and find ways to, find a path through these mess of balls that they might not have had the determination. So if it's giving them fuel and focus, I'm fine with that story. But then if they start feeling fearful and hopeless and scared of how bad it's going to hurt if they lose and terrified of that they can't handle going through that, and it's creating now all of a sudden their arm feels shaky and weak they're losing confidence in themselves. Well, then I'd say that story is not serving them. So I'm not judging. So here's some opinions of mine. These are just opinions. This is what I believe. But I don't really believe that stories are true and false. I think that they're useful and practical, or they could be what's the opposite of useful? They could be impractical and counterproductive. And that even the same story, like I can't allow, like loss is not an option. That story can be productive in some situations and counterproductive in others. And so instead of latching onto a set of stories that I think are always rigidly true, for me, I think that I have to be aware that when I'm going off the rails with negative emotion, and when I find myself um, creating a lot of obstacles towards, whatever, if I'm creating a lot of self-loathing, frustration, fear, things like this, then I might look at like, well, what stories am I telling myself that are generating all this? And I have to look at those and kind of deal with those and put those and correct those and let those go, so that I can kind of go back to doing what I want to do, which is have fun hitting balls in the hole and trying my best. So for
Right.
me, what that clutter is would be beliefs that I'm clinging to right now that are not serving me. What do you think?
No, I mean, I don't think I do things the same way you do in terms of that. I have a kind of a reset way of doing it. But the way that everything you just described, there's absolutely nothing wrong with what you just said at all. Um, like for me, after a miss or a loss of a game or something like that, uh, for me, when I'm sitting in the chair, kind of the way that I do things is I start telling myself how awesome it's going to be the next time I get up out of my chair, how awesome it's going to be able to get up there and play my perfect process, right? Just kind of basically straight right directly out of the Pleasures of Small Motions playbook, uh, uh, which is a wonderful book, by the way, if you have never read it.
I have,
Um,
yes.
uh, and I really loved that line. Well, I loved about every single line of that book. Like I took a highlighter to that book, thinking I was gonna that I was gonna write down the important parts of it, and all I did was turn the entire book yellow.
I've done that
Um,
before with books. It's super funny. I
it,
didn't know how to
yeah,
highlight. I ended up highlighting the whole book.
it,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Uh, so I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful way for me just to say, just to kind of just hit the reset button and go, man, you know what? Uh, uh, I'm going to get up and really show this place how I play this game.
So let
You
me
know,
let me let me jump in a little bit. So one of the things that I where what I'm saying, and the same way, there, okay, there's what you want to do, and then there's something that's interfering with doing that. So let's go back to your play the table, not the player. The reason we don't like that is you're nervous about a player, you're nervous about how good they play, you're shaky, you're scared, you can't even visualize winning. All you can visualize is getting weak, missing balls, and losing. And because of that, you can't visualize an outcome or a performance that you want, and you're struggling. So to just tell your brain, don't let it get to you. It's like, no, there's a problem that needs to be. So in that moment, if you tell that player, hey, just be the ball and just remember the last time you were a stroke, nothing mattered. You're just like really having fun and just focused on the contact point and the sensation of shooting balls. Just go do that again. The problem is they can't do that again because they're hung up on something, which is this other fear. So what they
mm-hmm.
have to do, according to this is how I look at it, is they have to find out what they're scared of and why that's scary and deal with that, so that then they could go ahead and play the table, not the player, and have fun playing their game. So for
Right.
me, there's what you want, which is the zone, and then there's the clutter that's in the way. So, for example, when I'm really, really, really frustrated with something, and I just pick a random example, maybe my opponent has slopped in 2 9 balls and then they've missed 3 times, and the 2 times I was hooked, and then they missed again, and now they've missed the 8 ball, and now I'm frozen. They froze me on top of the nine, so all of a sudden this 8 ball, normally I just win this game, and now I'm jacked up over the 9 ball, and this isn't supposed to be how it's supposed to go. In that moment, I can tell myself, next time I get to the table, I'm going to show how I play this game, and I'm really looking forward to it. But then as soon as I see that damn ball froze on top of the nine, I'm angry. Like, why do I have to deal with this? Of course they're going to put me there. Da, da, da. So for me, I say that my mental game approach is two pronged. The first prong is clearing out what's cluttering you. And then the second prong is trying to trigger back into the successful positive mindset that you're describing with, the joy of facing this next challenge. So for me, if I was frustrated and somebody jacked me up over the ball, I have to address that. Okay, I'm angry. I've got something triggered, like something, rattling me right now. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
look at that and say, okay, well, what story am I telling myself that's making me feel so angry?
So
And
you work through the emotion.
yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, just like what we were talking about before, kind of going full circle. So let me ask you this: after you work through that emotion, What's your next thought in order to get yourself back into focus?
So I go to my processes, which I've gone to. I'm going to answer your question very specifically. I have a deck of flashcards that I've been using when I train pool, and the way my flashcards work is I don't draw a flashcard on every shot. But what I do is I and what these flashcards are is they are the compilation of many, many, many different situations that are challenging mentally. It's basically this is a visualization exercise where when I'm practicing at home, I'm not plagued with doubts and fears like I am during competition. So what I've done over many years is I've journaled and written down all the different stuff I've dealt with, and I've written them on paper to where when I'm playing pool, I could draw a flashcard and I can remember facing that particular doubt, fear, frustration, and I could visualize that I'm in a situation. And then I have a rehearsed response to that on the back, which has two parts. The first part is dealing with that distraction. But the second part on every flashcard is the same, which is going back to my processes, which I'll get into. So for me, for example, we talked about attitude towards loss, and I mentioned one flashcard where I talked about sometimes I'll get nervous and I'll be like, oh man, if I miss this, I might lose. Well, this my short answer for that on the back of the flashcard is that oh, great, another loss for my collection. I hope I collect all four colors someday. Like I want like basically what I would say is that the problem is that my belief is that there's something wrong with losing. And that outlook is I've my mindset, there's a problem is I'm fearful and underconfident. Why am I fearful? Because I'm afraid that I might lose and that would be horrible. And then because I've thought about this, it's like, well, when I don't necessarily that outlook that's I'm telling myself a story that loss is horrible. And that story is making me scared. Well, then I go back and look at that story then and say, well, is this story serving me? And the answer is if it's making me scared, then I don't like the way that story's serving me. So I go back and manually correct that story and say, no, no, no. I actually have a different story, I believe, which is that a champion gets plenty of wins and plenty of losses, and neither are, that they're both part of the same coin. A champion's not measured off losses, they're measured off wins, and that the more losses you get, the more wins you get. So therefore, forget about trying to win all the time. Let's just go collect losses because I know if I get a million losses, I'll win something someday and I don't really care. So let's go ahead. If it's my time to lose, so be it. I don't care. And so by telling myself that story, I stop being as terrified of the loss, and then I'm free to go down and do my best to win. So that's I'm explaining to people that my flash. So one for example of a flashcard that might be on the front, it says, "If you miss this, you might lose." And so I picture myself in that situation. On the back, it might say, which is my rehearsed response, which is great, another loss for my collection. I hope I get all four colors. And then the second part of the flashcard is my process, which I have three things I tell myself: breathe, swing, and joy. I want to take a deep breath. I want to put a good swing on the ball, and I want there to be a smile in my heart, if not on my face, because I want to enjoy how tough the adversity of the game is. So I want those are things I know that if I take a deep breath, I know that if I put a trusting swing, and I know that if I'm in a good mindset, if I'm enjoying how tough the game is instead of resenting how tough the game is. So every flashcard has a different situation, but every time my flashcards have a different situation, a different response, but they all end with breathe, swing, and joy. So to answer your question, you said, what is it that you try to, once you clear the clutter, what do you go back to? I'd say the clutter for me are the stories that are causing negative emotions that are interfering with my performance. And once I work through those and deal with those, I always go back to my processes, which for me, my big three are take a deep breath, put on a trusting swing, and make sure I'm enjoying the adversity of the game. What do you think?
So, yeah, no, I like everything you just said, and I'm gonna ask a follow up question, which is, what do you love about the game? You kind of answered that, which is you love the adversity, you love the how hard the game can be, and that and that you're putting your best foot forward in order to accomplish your goals with it. I'm assuming, right? So that's what you love about the game
Yeah, and the funny
the
part
most.
is yeah. Continue. Of course, I love so many things about the game, but for now, I don't. I absolutely agree that I love being tested by adversity. Yes, and
Yeah.
even if I don't always feel that way, Devin, I that's a story that I tell myself that serves me.
Yeah. Well, and the reason why I wanted to say that is because the way you just explained that, I mean, my way of dealing with the aftermath of an emotion after I've gone through all of that is I ask myself the question, what do you love about this game? And so after I've gone through the frustration or whatever that was, I get back into this, man, I really love the fact that, that here I have a half a spear on the end of my full cue that's hitting another spear, which has got to hit another spear so perfectly that it goes in a perfect angle into a pocket. And not only does that need to happen, but I need to have such control over the first sphere that I have a perfect aligned shot for my next shot. And and there's so many moving parts with that, and I have control over that, and it's all on me on whether or not I succeed or I fail, and I love that, right? And and that's so it's essentially we're doing the same thing. It's just your way of doing it and my way of doing it.
Yeah,
Uh,
as long
so
as you can put to bed the doubts or fears that are in your way and accomplish, as long as
yeah,
you can. So bottom line is you got to get to where you feel the right way again.
right,
And
yeah,
so for me, yeah, I guess for me, I've I've been a little bit more deliberate about what are the things that are interfering. Like what are the like when somebody says play the table, not the player. Like if I cannot visualize myself beating a better player. I'm playing this guy and I can't even picture any outcome that leads to a win. I can't even visual like you say, visualize what you want. Well, I'm literally trying to picture it. All I can visualize is losing to this guy. And in that moment, um, I might have to do something to like I want to get to where I can visualize winning. It's not that I don't, but like I have to there's something stopping me and I have to deal
right,
with that first. And so for
yeah.
me, I've so let me just use that as an example, as another one. So like well, like so what do you do in that moment? Like what advice would you have if somebody's in that moment and they can't visualize what they want? There's some kind of block. What do you think?
Well, positivity is my key to that. I mean, of course, there's times when when it's just not going to work for you, right? That I don't care how good you get at the mental portion of this game. Sometimes there are hurdles that you can't overcome. Does that mean you stop trying? Absolutely not. Uh, uh, but to me, what I end up doing if something like that happens is I have a realization through the studies that I've done with mental management and everything, and we tend to think that we have the ability to multitask in our brains, think about a bunch of things at the same time. That is absolutely incorrect. We're really only able to consciously think about one thing at a time. So I always just change what it is I'm thinking about, but it's always something that keeps my focus in pool. So, like I say, why do I love the game? That's the first thing I try to do is I try to think about those things and have that occupy my brain. If that doesn't work, I root for the player that's at the table.
Mm,
I basically go into something I call commentator mode, where I'm watching what they're doing and I'm essentially playing Jeremy Jones in a lot of ways, where it's like I'm thinking about what they should do next, and then I start thinking about what they did different from what I expected them to do, and I start and then I just, in other words, I keep my mind occupied with the game, so my focus is still in the game, but it's not on whatever it was that got me so upset that I lost my concentration and my focus on what I was doing. So that's the way I handle it.
well, what's nice about
So
that is you're you're becoming more detached. You're going from so there's observation and there's judgment. And when you're emotionally distraught over results and then you're caught up in this judgmental, like I don't want him to make this and I don't want to lose and I don't want him to win and I hope he leaves me something I can make. And you go in this like this weak, whiny, result oriented mindset. And when you start commentating in a detached tone of voice, you go from judging to observing. where you're no
Yep.
longer you're witnessing everything, but you're just not attaching emotional stake to whether or not these balls go in. So you're what you're doing is by putting yourself in the role of a commentator, you're going to a detached observation as opposed to an emotional judgment, and it can help you let go of those emotions a little bit and get back into a more detached state of mind. So that I can see a lot of value in that. I have to think about if I do that or not. I might do it without really knowing that. But what I would say if somebody had asked me like, how do you deal with the fear of playing a better player? So like and again, it's a podcast, where it's a conversation. I'm not going to hijack with a whole. I could give a long answer on this one because this has been this has been a significant portion of my life is learning how to deal with this. Um, I found a story that works for me, and that perspective has to do with this idea, which is that the wrong perspective, the faulty belief, I would say, that's causing me to be afraid of losing to this player. I've examined this in depth. And what I find at the root of those incorrect beliefs, there are some beliefs like I ought to be able to find a way to beat this guy this time right now. And if I can't, we're going to find out right now if I'm ever going to be the champion that can beat this guy or if I'm always going to be the loser that never can beat this guy. It's like these are some all or nothing beliefs that we have, which is I'm either always going to be a champion, I'm always going to be a chump, or I get to be a champion. And to this is the set where we get to find it out. Like if you peel that back, those are some beliefs that people might be hanging on to that are creating this fear or this I've never beat this guy before and I'm afraid I'll never be able to do it. And then that would mean that I'm a failure and I'll never be any good at pool and I'll never have a success and I'll never be happy and I'll never be worthy of love and I'll just be a hopeless failure all my life. Like if you really peel it back, like people have some real deep under that iceberg, there's some real deep crap. And so
Yeah.
for me, the story that I tell myself is this. I I ask myself this question. This is like what I work through as I say, like if I were to play this guy a million sets of pool, he's going to beat me a million sets in a row. Is that what's going to happen? And even it's like no. At some point, especially if I play him again and again and again and again, I'm going to get more and more comfortable playing him. I'm going to learn things by playing him. I'll improve my pool game, and little by little by little, even if the guy could beat me a million of sets in a row, if I never got better, I'm sure I'll get better along the way too. And so between having a million swings and the improvement that comes from a million swings, I'm sure at some point I will develop myself into a player that maybe isn't as good as him, maybe not better than him, but I'm sure at some point I will become a player that can get up and deliver a winning set against this guy. And so I believe that is so the story I'm telling myself is not I will beat him right here and now and prove it. The story I'm telling myself is I know someday I will be a player that can beat this guy. Now, to explain why this helps me, there's 2 points. One thing is I accept it almost doesn't matter to me if it is today or not because I am satisfied. What gives me joy is knowing that someday I will beat this guy in a meaningful venue with people watching and four figures on the line and all this stuff. Someday that will happen. And that gives me joy to know that someday I will have that winning set against this guy. And
I love that.
whether it's today or not, I know it'll happen. And so because I know it'll happen, it doesn't have to happen today. I'm okay. But at the same time, in a weird paradox, it won't happen if I don't try to make it today. So there's this weird thing where I have to try to make it today because only by trying my best will someday that actually happen. But because I'm going to try my best today, I know that someday it will happen. And so that if it's not today, it doesn't really matter. So this is a weird thing. I'm going to give my all to trying to make it today, but it doesn't matter if it's today or not because I know it will happen eventually as long as I die trying. So that's the
No,
weird paradox. So in the
that's
end,
a
I
that's
boil, I'm almost
fantastic.
done. I boil it all down to a flashcard. So on the front is, I don't know if I can beat this guy. And on the back of the flashcard is, someday I'll be the kind of player that can. Let's try my best to make it today. Breathe,
I
swing,
think
enjoy.
that's I think that's absolutely fantastic. Um,
Thank you.
I could not have said that better myself. And what it reminds me of is something that I have my students avoid at all costs, which is and another one of my pet peeves, which is, you know, these people that are, like I'm the biggest badass on this sport has ever seen type of mentality. I never miss. The ultra fake kind of confidence um, type of scenarios.
Fake it till you make it, people. Yeah.
Right. And uh, I always tell people, okay, so what happens when you don't live up to that standard, right?
Well, you make
Like,
excuses.
what is right? You make excuses, and the letdown puts you in a state of mind that makes it very hard for you to come back from that, and maybe not for months. That's the makings of slumps, and um, you know,
They
and that
either make it.
approach that you
I
just
forgot.
had,
They either make excuses or they quit competing where they could get exposed, and they start
right?
being a big fish in a small pond again. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
and
Go on.
just the fear that people are going to see them for the fake that they are makes it even worse, right? Uh, so it's one of those things where it's like, look, it's much better to have the approach. Look, it's like me to make this shot than it is I can't miss. I'm the baddest person that's ever played this game.
Yeah, you
Uh,
know what? You mentioned that one thing. I want to plug your group again. You actually had this in your mental game for billiard management group. Sorry, mental management for billiards. And this is great. Just to give everyone an example, you actually asked a question. I'm trying to find the post right now about which is the best thing to tell yourself when you're facing a tough shot. And you had five answers, and one of them was I know I'll make this. One was don't miss. One was I'm the type of player that could make this shot. Or one was I remember making this shot before. Like you had five answers, and I think I remembered four of them. But anyway,
mhm.
and then you talked, and then after people kind of voted, you had your answer about what. And out of the way, I took the one that you said was a close second. That was my answer. I didn't post, but I read it. And so anyway, I wanted everyone to know you can train mental management through a Facebook group. This is what he's doing. But
Yeah, number one and number two are pretty interchangeable in terms of which one is number one and number two.
yeah, I think I
I
used number two, which is it's like me to make this shot. Yeah.
right, and that's the go-to for anyone that doesn't have confidence issues, right? If you don't have confidence issues, that is number one because that's all you need. It's like
And
me to make this shot. My training has provided me the ability to make this shot. I'm good, you know.
and the one I
Um,
use is very similar to what I was just saying with the story, which is someday I'm gonna spear a ball like this in when it counts. And I don't know if it's
mhm.
today or not, but someday I'm gonna spear this ball in when it really matters, and it'll be awesome when that day comes. Let's it doesn't matter if it's today or not. I know it'll come, but let's see if it's today. That's what I tell
Yeah,
myself.
yeah, man, and there's just so many facets to this game, and I guess that post goes to the whole imagery thing, right? So it's like words matter in terms of imagery. Like, all right, I never miss. Okay, so that was one of them. I never miss. Okay, well, that sounds like a wonderful, confident thing to tell yourself, except for the word miss is in there. So does that word miss make you think of a miss instead of the making of the shot? It's very possible. So don't tell yourself that. Tell yourself it's like me to make this shot.
Right, but then
Uh,
and then to your point, because then the other part was
yeah,
that some people would say themselves is I always make this shot, and the reason
right,
that's wrong, and I didn't even read. I'm just going to tell you why I think it's wrong. The problem is as you say, it's delusional. It's not true. And so when you
right,
tell yourself a story that you know isn't true, if you're facing a tough nine ball and you're like I always make this shot, well, instead of bringing confidence, it actually brings fear because it's fear of exposure, fear of this lie that you're telling yourself being exposed to be not true. And then there's this fear, well, what if I do miss? And then what if that's not true? And then wouldn't that be horrible? And so
right.
lying to
And
your,
there are
so that,
plenty of images in your brain of you missing that shot.
right. Yeah. Because then your brain's going to come up with exceptions. So
Right,
telling yourself you always miss, you're afraid of don't miss isn't working. It's the wrong image, but telling yourself you always make it is still going to bring up those images. So that's why for me, it's important to tell myself stories that I actually can believe. So instead of saying, I never make this, my story of someday I'm going to spear one of these in when it counts, well, that's a lot easier to believe that someday, like what, in the rest of my life, I'm never going to spear one of these in. Come on, someday I'll
Yeah.
make it. And so for me, that's easy to believe, but it also helps me bring up the image of spearing the ball in and having fun with it. Yeah.
Those those hard shots. What I end up telling myself is, this is my favorite shot, and I got a ton of those favorite shots.
What's
But
funny is
you know,
I actually, this is really, it's amazing how you can get to, because by the way, we are segueing into imagery and we're just getting warmed up with imagery. But just to put the other thing to bed, you were talking about triggers to get in the zone. I was talking about clearing out the clutter that prevents us. But in the end, we were talking about either way, we're trying to get to the same place. And
mhm.
that's what we were kind of agreeing on. So for this one, similarly, when you say it's your favorite shot, I you might get mad at me, but I do the opposite, which is when I find myself thinking, God, of course this shot comes up. I'm terrible at this shot. Whenever I hear myself getting nervous, like, of course, this is like my worst shot. Why would this shot come up right now? I actually have fun with it. I'm like, great. Then if I'm terrible at this shot, great. Then it shouldn't be hard to improve because God, if I'm terrible, I don't even have to be good at this to improve. All I got to do is get less terrible. If I can ever someday I'll be just bad at this shot, and that would be improvement. Like if I think it's very, and this sounds terrible, like in the sense of like I'm telling myself to be bad, but what I'm saying is I'm removing the obstacle of the pressure of the fear of being bad because I think it's hilarious how our judgmental, critical mind can believe two things that are opposite. So here are two statements that our critical mind can believe of ourselves. One is you're the worst pool player in the universe. And the other thing is you'll never get any better. And it's like, well, wait a minute, brain. Which is it? If I'm the worst pool player in the universe, anything I do has to make me get better, right? How can I both be the worst that's ever lived and can't ever get any better? That's not possible. So when I start thinking I'm terrible at this shot, I'm like, well, then what you're telling me, brain, is it shouldn't be hard to get better at this shot. Here's a good opportunity. I guess the bar's pretty low, so I have no expectations. So therefore, great. Now that that's off my back, I guess you're not expecting me to make this and be a hero. So therefore, I got nowhere to go but up. Let's go. And so for me, it's even though on the one hand it sounds like what I'm saying is really negative, which is great. I'm terrible at this shot, but what I'm doing then is I'm actually focused on how easy it will be to grow and improve at this shot, and this next swing at it is actually just going to be another road on my journey of improving at this shot. And so either way, it serves to take away all the pressure and expectation, and it's also hard to feel really scared about it because like, well, what you're saying is I'm terrible, I'm going to miss, and it's going to cost me the game. Well, I got nowhere to go but up. Then I don't know.
Yeah,
But
no,
anyway,
I
maybe
like
that's
that.
bad for imagery, but it's good for handling pressure. But then I still go back.
Right.
But then even after all I say all that, I have to go back and say, okay, now that's not really what I'm picturing when I shoot, though, Devin. That's the story. That's the shift of stories that I'm telling
Hmm.
myself to let go of the fear. And then
Right.
once I shift stories, then I go back to taking a deep breath, picture on what I want, and put a good swing on. So I do go back to the positive imagery. I just have to deal with the negative fears first. But
Yeah.
anyway, I got caught up in that. But yeah.
No, it's dealing with the emotions is always real important. I mean, I guess what you could say is that's what you're doing in the chair before you get back up, right?
Yeah, or if the opponent leaves me my nightmare shot, that I might go and it sounds like a lot of words, but just to be clear to people, in the moment, because I've gone through this a million times and practiced it, in the moment I might look up and my first reaction is, of course they left me this shot. I'm terrible at this shot. And then that's what I'm thinking as I'm standing up out of my chair. And then I'll just take a minute because I've practiced this with my flashcards. And so I just picture for 1 minute, I'm just like, well, great. That I guess it shouldn't be hard to get better. Let's go. And then I just take a
Yeah.
deep breath and go back to picturing what I want.
No, that's
So
great.
in real time,
I,
it's like we're talking
it,
about moments. Yeah.
right. And it's certain. Yeah. Well, and what the funny thing is about all this stuff is those moments get shorter and shorter and shorter the better and better you get at these types of tools, right? You know,
It a hundred
uh, like
percent.
like coming up with the imagery when I first realized how important imagery was, that portion of my pre-shot routine took a relatively long period of time in my head. It was probably only 6 7 seconds really, but it felt like an eternity. Uh, Whereas now that imagery happens on autopilot.
I
You
want to.
know,
So we have officially shifted to imagery, and I have a question about that. For people listening, I've noticed this too. That like passage of time, anytime you're trying to work in a new habit, it feels like an interruption to your normal rhythm, and it feels very interfering. But once you crave it, then it just becomes part of your rhythm. So let me ask you this: when you're talking now, we're talking about imagery officially. So what you're talking about? What exactly? What role does imagery play? Where and you're talking about your pre-shot before you drop on a ball? Like, how does somebody add imagery to their game, and why should they?
okay, so imagery is instructions for your body. Okay, that's what imagery is. Your your subconscious is what controls your body, not your conscious side of your brain. So if you're getting down on a shot and you're thinking consciously, know this: the conscious side of your brain is the worst pool player in the world.
Yeah.
So it's uh, so imagery is how your subconscious works. Your subconscious doesn't understand words. It doesn't understand conversations. It doesn't understand calculations. It understands a a movie. It has images of what you've done in the past, and it takes those images and it brings one of those images up in order to tell your body how to do something. If you don't have a previous image in which to work with, you got to use imagination to do it. And of course, that's when you don't really have the muscle memory to perform something. You're probably not as good at it as you would be at something that you've done 10,000 times. Um, so the practice of creating an image is really the practice of bringing up a past memory from your memory bank that applies to the situation that you're about to accomplish, whatever that shot might be. Um, so that's what you're really doing, and by pulling up that image and making that image as real as possible in every way possible. Like for instance, when I trained myself to really use imagery, and this is the same way I teach my students is I think of everything about that image that I possibly can. I think about the way the shock that I'm going to feel after the cue hits the cue ball, the noise the ball is going to make when it hits the pocket, the noise the cue ball might make after it comes off the rail. Even I might even think of the smells that are around me, the atmosphere that's around me. I try to think about as and make that image as vivid as possible to give myself the best possible picture uh, to use as the instruction for the shot, so that my body knows exactly what I want it to do, the speed of the shot, everything. Um,
Yeah.
that's
So, and you're doing this after you've decided what you want to do, but while you're still standing up and before you've dropped down to shoot, you're like,
right.
okay, how do I want this to look, feel, and yeah, you're gonna see that. It's almost like you're seeing the future. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I consider a lot of people say pre-shot routine. I don't believe in a pre-shot routine. I think we have three pre-shot routines, and the first one is your thinking mode, right? You're That's when you're making all the decisions you want to make. The second would be your imagery creation, and then the last one being getting down into your set position, address your cue ball, and begin the finishing of the stroke. So,
That
uh,
makes sense. And so what's interesting is as you're talking about it, um, I'm thinking about what I do, and and then I think about so Nate Tam was I had him on for a podcast a couple months ago, and I have a follow up with him talking. He actually wants to talk about he's more of a he's well learned on the science of the zone with different competition and like brain performances, and I'm not saying he's going to be talking about like you know all technical stuff and alpha waves and so whatever. I don't know. Like I have no idea, but I'm interested to hear what he has to say about the science of the zone. But anyway, for me, but one thing that we were talking about when we were talking about visualizing the break, when we were talking about the break, We did a podcast on the break, and he was talking about the role of imagery, and then we talked about some hacks to help the imagery. And so, for example, imagery is important. And so sometimes this is getting ahead of myself here in the conversation, but sometimes your brain has trouble picturing success in the moment. You're looking at the shot and all you can picture is missing. And so one thing that I do quite a bit, Devin, is I will picture a version of the shot that I can picture making. So for example, if I'm shooting a ball down the side rail and I have a flat angle and I need to hit pretty firm because I need to shoot this ball down the rail and force my cue ball to the other side of the table for position. At first, all I can picture is that ball rattling out of the corner because I'm getting ready to wind up and smack this ball, and I know how tight the pockets play, and it's not really the speed I'd like to shoot it at, right? So I find myself kind of short of breath, and I'm struggling to picture what I want. So you know what I do? I picture, well, what if this was my money ball and all I had to do was cinch it? And then I picture shooting it at a softer speed where I'd like to shoot it at that speed. And all of a sudden, now I can picture the ball going in. And then once I sit with that feeling, then I'm like, well, I'm just going to do that. And then I'm going to swing a little more. And then I can build it out to the image I want. Or another example would be if I have a long shot and I'm really struggling to picture it, I might walk up and pretend that there's a cue ball 6 inches from the ball. And then I'm shooting from 6 inches away. And I picture the ghost ball, like I picture the cue ball there, and I picture how I'd feel shooting the shot from there. And all of a sudden, I can help get the image I want of how it would feel to shoot. And now I can picture making it. I can picture the ball going in. And then once I got that image, then I just back up to where the cue ball's at. And at least now I've got that baseline image. And it's now that I've set that groove and kind of recalled that feeling. So anyway, I'm agreeing that getting that image in your mind of what you want is a critical part of every step of every shot. And that actually I got ahead of myself because then that would answer the next question, at least from my point of view, which is what if you struggle to picture success? And that's something I do. But yeah, keep going. We're just, this is gonna, I got a little excited.
Yeah,
Sorry.
struggling with the image is just something. Again, I guess that's the way you handle it, and that sounds great. I might actually steal that from you.
Yeah. What do you
Uh,
do?
well, I go back to this is my favorite shot, which seems to work pretty good for me most of the time.
Okay.
And of course, does it work 100% of the time? Absolutely not. Of course not. Right? There's always those times when you take a shot and you're just you don't have the you don't have the confidence that you're going to make it. I mean, we've all run into those situations, but uh, that's usually my go-to one every single time is this is my favorite shot, and that seems to help me to picture a positive outcome. And everything I do in terms of the game right now is based off of completely keeping negativity out of my game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, uh, in every way. Like boy, I hope my opponent misses. Even isn't something I do anymore. I don't. I root for my opponent to run out.
Well,
Um,
Devin, we are. I'll tell you, this is actually the foundational belief of all the things that I believe and all the stories. I've got an elaborate web of stories I tell myself to manage myself. But the foundational story, and I think this is maybe why we ended up talking to each other, is we might have this in common, is that the very foundation of it all is I believe everything's okay. It's all good. Everything's fine. There's no problem. So that means whatever I get worked up about, whatever, well, I'm upset because he might run out. It's like, okay, I like basically, Devin, I think it's all good. And I think that if I ever feel for a moment like it might not be all good, that's a warning sign to me that I'm probably looking at something wrong because I actually know that it is all good. And so it's
sure.
all good. And I want to feel like it's all good all the time. And then if something doesn't feel like it's all good, then I zoom in and investigate. I'm like, what story am I telling myself where I don't think it's all good? Because it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Look, the worst thing that could happen if my opponent runs out, I learn something from him. So that doesn't sound too bad to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound too bad to me at all. I mean, uh, uh, if they played a little bit smarter of a game than I did, and they took that rack, um, then it's on me to figure out what they did that I didn't do, so I can go back to my table at home and figure that one out. You know,
Yeah, they're
I,
coaching me
I
to. It's because of the coaching that they're giving me by beating me this rack is going to help me hit my pool goals in the future. Yep.
right, right. It's all about positivity. You think negative in one way, you're going to think negative in another, and another and another, and it's all about keeping things positive. No negative, and even with the imagery, going right back to the imagery thing, it's just the same thing. Like I was saying, even if the negative word like a miss, even when you're saying I don't miss, could have a negative impact on you. So make, make, not miss, make. You know,
I like it.
um, and it's that's just the way that's my own personal aspect of keeping positivity. The more you keep positive about everything in the game, even when things are going wrong. One of my favorite sayings is, look, I don't care if the best thing you do is you get up from the chair, you trip on a shoelace, and you knock yourself out on the table. When you're getting carted off to the hospital, tell yourself, man, I got out of that chair like a boss. I mean, just like, I mean, I just always think positively about things, because the more you start thinking of the negative side of things, the more you're going to get that frustration. The more it's going to bring you down, and it's just this game doesn't have room for any of that. You have to, if you want to play this game at a level where you're very competitive, kind of like I mean, you're you're a damn good player, and
Thank you,
you're
Devin.
much better than I am, and and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you are so positive, that you've understood that, where you've already worked that portion out in your head and in your game, and I think that helps you to be the better player that you are. Hadn't been easy for me to do that. I was a real negative Nelly for 40 years of my life, so this is something I'm learning still. But it's something that has been really, really positive in my life, and not just with pool, with
No,
everything.
I agree. I talk about this, where I think for me that like if I was to die tomorrow, and have regrets or tonight or whatever, or right during this podcast, anyway, then nobody would hear it. But anyway, I after at the moment I hit publish on my podcast, if I were to die, my regrets, I of course I'd have a lot of regrets about experiences I'd love to have in the future with my kids and their kids if they have kids or whatever else. But I I would regret not sharing some of the things that I've learned about the mental game. That would actually, and even though I feel like I might end up having I don't really want to write a book about the physical game of pool, but like there's some things I feel like I could contribute to the physical game of pool. There's some understandings of how to teach and certain concepts and organization and steps that things that anyway, I think I could offer some things about the physical game. However, if none of that was ever passed, like people at least can watch other players and learn how to hit the balls in. But like with the mental game, you can't look at somebody and see what you could look at them physically and see the difference. And I think one of the reasons going back to why don't people understand how important the mental game is, they can look at a pro play and see how they shoot differently physically, but they can't see how the pro thinks differently. And so they don't see the gap as much as the gap really is. And then I also know that there's a lot of people that are naysayers. They're like, well, the pros, Shane Van Boning, does he go take mental game, classes? And it's like, well, it's ridiculous because he has been in competitive situations full time for 30 years, and he is constantly facing these situations, learning to deal with them, but also getting mentored by all the other top players, eating lunch and asking them how they deal with this late at night and on these long drives, and late at night in the hotel room asking other people how they handle this, or what would you do if this happened, or how do you deal with this. And they're always mentoring and coaching each other nonstop. So yes, instruction matters, and that there is something. So then you could say, well, what about the people that just learn through trial and error? And it's like, well, even still, when people say you can learn this stuff from experience, then it's like, okay, A, are you going to go play full time for 30 years? And if not, you know, then what difference does it make if that works for them? But B, when you say people learn something from experience, like what did they learn from experience? What if they could share that with you so you didn't have to spend 30 years to figure it out? And so anyway, okay, I got worked up about this, but bottom line is we were saying that I was saying that yes, I believe that I but during so I actually teach mental game as well. And so for people that want to know, I have a little course, a 3-person Zoom course where once I get 3 people that line up schedules, we do a little mental game coaching. And you can again mnpoolbootcamp.com. You can check that out, email me for more info. But yeah, if I were to die tomorrow, and the reason I say that is because I like the Trojan horse when I teach pool. I like to kind of teach mental game. And as I teach mental game, to your point, I hope it ripples out and changes not only their pool game, but the way they navigate through life. Because it definitely, that whole rant was just agreeing with you that it goes from pool to your way of life, and it just helps you live better.
Yeah, totally agree. I just one of the happier things I've done for myself was to really understand the mental portion of this game and how much it's really made me a better person in general. It's a better husband, a better coach, uh, and just better at life. I'm a happier person, I think. You know.
Amen, brother. So okay, so just to recap a couple of the big points. So what we've a couple things that we've really hit on it that we agree with. If it, like the 3 biggest things are: one, it's all good, positive, good, enjoying the adversity of the game, and avoiding negativity because there's no need for it if you know how to manage your emotions. Number 2, it's not about closing off and shutting out feelings and denying feelings. It's about or telling yourself you can't have bad. It's about learning to manage them and developing strategies to manage through those feelings effectively. And 3, a great way to do that is to communicate to your body through images, and to do that as a phase of the shot between the decision and the execution should be the imagery and sending your brain a picture of what it looks like, and things like that. So those are the if just to kind of like because we talk and I know I'm a long talker. I'm sorry. That's
Mhm.
people listen to me for some reason. So thank you guys for tuning in, and thanks Devin for putting up with me. But
Hey,
in all of those words, I just wanted to make sure people took away a few. I just wanted to clarify the specific nuggets that we kind of hopefully went over. But now,
yeah.
before I wrap up on the podcast, I want to ask you about this mental management for billiards. Um, I know why you started it. Right now, you've got almost 20,000 members, which is how long ago did you start this?
It's been about 2 years.
Wow, that's pretty awesome,
Yeah.
man. So look at you. So it's blowing up. It's a private group, which is for a private group. I mean, that's amazing. And then so what do you know where this is going, or are you just kind of like just growing and seeing how it develops, or do you have a clear vision? Have you communicated to your body what you expected to do here, Devin?
Well, I never expected it to be 20,000 people strong, but I was hopeful, of course. But I mean, mainly what I wanted to do is I wanted there to be a place, mainly for my students, to be able to go to ask questions, to get answers, and to get support from the pool community to help them along in their games. Like for instance, I mean, I'm the kind of guy that's like, okay, if you're my student, you're my student for life. I don't even charge my students for follow-up visits usually. They go through my pool school, which is usually a 3-day course. Um, and After that, if they need touch-ups, if they need me for something, if they need me to do a video and check and see what they're doing incorrectly with their stroke, or talk to them about some mental problems that they're having or whatever, I'm there for them at that point. Um, uh, and that's really what I wanted this to be, was to be something along those lines. What it has turned into more than that is a way to reach out to amateur players. Actually across the world. I've got students in Argentina now. Um, um, because of that group. So it's kind of a thing where uh, uh, it's it blew up. I'm glad it did because it's bringing a part of this game out into the open that amateurs really didn't have before, or not as nearly as much as they needed it to be anyway. So I'm 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 really happy that this has gone on. It's a lot of work sometimes, um, and I'm a busy guy otherwise. So sometimes I'm not as busy on the group a lot of times as I want, but I've got a really good admin team that's there to help me kind of get rid of any riffraff and try to keep it on point.
I love
We
it,
keep
man. And you
yeah
know what I like the most? What I like the most about it is the one place that you like I mentioned, like I do mental game coaching, but the difference and the gap here is the same thing. I do pool instruction for a living, but I do not, okay, as a rule, I don't work with beginners. Not that I can't. I mean, it's just that that's just not really my focus. I like
mhm.
working with strong players and helping them take their game, to the next level. And so, because I've just seen a lot of people get stuck, 580 Fargo, 600 Fargo, a lot of people stall out at some point and then they feel like they don't know what they kind of resign themselves. This is as good as they can get, and I just I don't think that's necessary. So I like to help strong players one on one break through. But as a result of that, is what I'm not good at is like I'm not the guy that's going to have um like a YouTube channel where I have 100,000 subscribers. So because I'm very good at like one on one or in these mental game groups of three, I can do like one or three, and then by doing personalized one on one, that's where I shine, and I can work with really strong players and get really into it.
I
Where I
don't know.
struggle,
You did pretty good with your videos that you did with Lil Chris.
oh, thank you. I didn't know you saw that. That's awesome. Okay. Anyway, but what I will say is that when I look at your mental game group, I am overwhelmed because you are dealing with thousands of people that have all different levels of play and understanding, which means, and some of the people that ask questions, I mean, I get exasperated because some of them are just like they're so like I sometimes I struggle making the money ball. How do you do this? And I'm like, oh my god, like it's not that that's a stupid question, but the reason I look up to the sky is because I'm like, well, it's such a like you're asking such a short question when it has such a long answer. It's almost like if somebody said, well, how do I play good pool? It's like, oh my gosh, okay, if one of your non-pool playing friends said, well, how do I play good pool? It's like, okay, there's the answer is put a lot of time in on the table and learn a lot over the years and you can eventually become a good pool player. Like it's not a one line answer. But anyway, so the point is that I see the questions you get and I see the number of the diversity of the audience that you have and the diversity of their education and understanding, and I'm just daunted by your task, man. And so I'm fighting the good fight with the one-on-ones and the smaller groups. I'm good at that, but when I see what you're dealing with and how you do it, I'm like, man, this is important because you're going to help. I think I can make a huge change for a small number of people, but you're making a big change, and you're making a an impact on a huge number. That's just a daunting undertaking. So I tip my hat, sir.
Well, I really appreciate that. That makes me feel really good because that's along the lines of what I want to do. I really would like. I saw an area where I could make an impact, and that's what I sought out to do. With my instruction, that's why I specialize in the middle management portion of it. And it's awesome that somebody of your stature in the game sees value in what I'm doing. That's a very good feeling. Thank you.
Well, it's cool, man. So okay, so then that's where people can go, and we're gonna watch this thing shake and move and see how it evolves. But in the meantime, is there anything else that you feel like you wanted to say during our time together? Anything else you wanted to share before we start winding this thing up?
Just a shout out to you about a drill you did with Lil Chris that I absolutely love. Uh,
Is it that
which
seismic
I
wagon
which
wheel
which
cutting the ball down the rail with spin?
yes, love it, love it.
Out,
Let's.
outstanding.
I'm all about the mother drills that I learned with PBIA, and those are usually what I stick with. But that needs to be a mother drill. That is an awesome drill, and it teaches you so much about the game, and it's fantastic.
Well, thank you. If the day ever comes where we could, if you ever wanted to train physical, if the day ever comes, man, I've got anyway, if nothing else, stay tuned. I'll be doing more stuff with little Chris. And but in any case, man, I just anybody that loves pool, I wish I had time to work with everybody one on one because I'm confident that there's nothing I could probably show you about fundamentals. But when it comes to gameplay and cue
Oh,
ball and patterns and really taking your, I just get, man, I wish
man,
we had traded pool
I
tonight.
would I would love it. And my wife is from Minnesota, so this isn't something that's out of the question either. So
Anyway, I'm not trying to
yeah.
how did this turn into anyway? Okay, what I was going to say then, thank you very much for shouting out to me. Then I will give a shout out, and I'm going to give a shout out to my last student, Kevin. This is a true story. Kevin just texted me yesterday, and I couldn't believe it. He texted me. He boot camped with me a couple weeks ago, and by the way, he's from Sydney, Australia. So, like you, my friend, I've gone international, but no, no, no. He was in
Mhm.
town because he was stateside for the VNEA, and guess what? He played in, among other things, he played in the senior 9 ball singles, uh, and he ended up winning. He ended up winning.
Oh, wow.
Here's what he said to me. He said that he went. Okay, here's his text. He said he played pretty good. He won 8 matches straight, and he won the finals on the hill. And he said it all came together. He played good with a calm mind. He certainly believed that the coaching and training he did with me helped lift his skills and prepared him for competition. And he has a picture of him with the trophy. He has a picture where he's next to Shane for the Hall of Fame induction. And then he has a picture with one of his female heroes, Wei, I don't know. Anyway, so he was excited. He shared me these pictures yesterday, and he showed me the, what do they call it? The Charlie, that Panther trophy, first place. Yeah. Anyway, pretty cool, man. So shout out to my man Kevin from Sydney, Australia. Yes, sir.
Good job, Kevin.
Cool. All right. Well, Devin, I'm going to quit the recording. If anybody has questions for you, they can go to Mental Management for Billiards. Questions for me, info at mnpoolbootcamp.com. Until next time.